హలో ఫ్రెండ్స్, ఇవాళ ఒక పాడ్కాస్ట్ వీడియో రికార్డ్ చేయబోతున్నాం. అయితే యూఎస్కి వచ్చిన కొత్తలో ఒక టర్మ్ వింటుండే అనమాట. ఇక్కడ పుట్టిన ఇండియన్ కిడ్స్ గురించి. అదేంటంటే అమెరికన్ బార్న్ కన్ఫ్యూజ్డ్ దేశీ, ఏబిసిడి అని. హలో ఫ్రెండ్స్, ఇవాళ ఒక పాడ్కాస్ట్ వీడియో రికార్డ్ చేయబోతున్నాం. అయితే యూఎస్కి వచ్చిన కొత్తలో ఒక టర్మ్ వింటుండే అనమాట. ఇక్కడ పుట్టిన ఇండియన్ కిడ్స్ గురించి. అదేంటంటే అమెరికన్ బార్న్ కన్ఫ్యూజ్డ్ దేశీ, ఏబిసిడి అని. నాకు కొన్ని రోజుల తర్వాత అర్థమైంది ఏంటంటే అమెరికన్ బార్న్ కంటే ఇండియన్ ఇమిగ్రెంట్స్ ఎక్కువ కన్ఫ్యూజ్డ్ ఉన్నారు ఈ కంట్రీలో. ఏ విషయం మీద అంటే ఇక్కడే ఉండాలా లేకపోతే ఇండియాకి వెళ్ళిపోవాలా అని. అయితే ఆ డెసిషన్ని డ్రైవ్ చేసే ఫ్యాక్టర్స్ ఎన్నో ఉంటాయి. దాంట్లో వన్ ఆఫ్ ద ఇంపార్టెంట్ ఫ్యాక్టర్, స్పెషల్లీ కిడ్స్ ఉన్న వాళ్ళకి, ఏంటంటే కిడ్స్ ఎట్లా ఆ ట్రాన్సిషన్ని హ్యాండిల్ చేస్తారని. అట్లాంటి ఒక కిడ్ నా కజిన్ గౌతమ్ ఇవాళ మనతో ఉన్నాడు. తను ఏంటంటే ఇక్కడ పుట్టి కాలిఫోర్నియాలో ఒక 9 years వరకు ఇక్కడ ఉండి, తర్వాత ఇండియాకి వెళ్ళిపోయి అక్కడ ఒక 9 years ఉండి ఇప్పుడు ఇక్కడికి వచ్చి యూఎస్లో సెటిల్ అయిపోయాడు. సో తన ఈ ట్రాన్సిషన్ అన్నిటిని ఎట్లా హ్యాండిల్ చేశాడు అని తెలుసుకుందాం. దానివల్ల మనకి ఒక ఐడియా వస్తుంది. ఓకే, హాయ్ గౌతమ్.
Hi Charan, how are you?
I'm good and thank you so much. And నా లాంగ్వేజ్ విల్ బి a mix of Telugu and English, so అదొకటి అడ్జస్ట్ అవ్వు. I know you can understand Telugu very well. So we'll keep it in both English and Telugu. My questions will be in both English and Telugu. So to start with, I wanted to first know, right? You moved back to India. So just give me an introduction about yourself. Like what do you do and what is your background?
Sure, yeah. First of all, thanks for having me on your podcast. So my name is Gautam. I'm Charnana's first cousin. I was born in San Jose, California, where I lived until I was 8 years old. And then in 2009, my dad got a job in Hyderabad, which is where both my parents are from originally. And we ended up moving there in 2009. I lived there until 2018, so until I was 18 years old. And I graduated high school from the International School of Hyderabad. After I graduated, I pursued a BS in neuroscience at UC San Diego. And once I finished that, I started a job in Boston, which is where I'm currently living now.
Okay. So I'm curious to know this. I never asked you about this. So when your parents came and told you, that Pinny and Bave, when they came and told you that, we are relocating to India. So what was your first reaction? Like, how did you feel emotionally? Because lot of things are going to change, right? Did you even realize that a lot of things are going to change at that time?
Yeah, so I was 8 years old. So for me, it was really hard to, grasp the gravity of the situation. The way I think I interpreted it, if I'm remembering correctly, is, we're choosing to move to India. We want to move to India. And so I didn't realize at the time that it was more out of distress, not necessarily like a voluntary thing that my parents wanted to do. And so I think I, absorbed that news and reacted, kind of ironically. I was very excited because for me, going to India meant, seeing my alma mater. It reminded me of, spending like my summer breaks with you guys, my cousins, playing cricket with my uncles and aunts and my cousins. And so I think in that moment I was, very excited. Obviously, I didn't realize how long the move would actually be and how long I would end up living there for. And so it didn't strike me that, I'm going to be leaving all my friends behind and, all my family friends, and I won't get to see them for a long time.
Right.
Yeah.
So you had your close friends, Sammy and Jay Andy. So you're obviously going to miss all of them. And how was your brother's reaction? Because he was much older at that time, right? He was probably around like 13 or so. He was in his teens. Mm-hmm. So do you know like how he reacted at that time when, did he express anything to you?
Yeah, I think his reaction was definitely more negative than mine. My brother had just finished 10th grade. And so, he was very set in his ways. He had all his friends in high school. He was very close to the family friends. He kind of knew the local area very well. And so I think for him, it was a very difficult adjustment. Especially, we didn't grow up speaking Telugu, neither of us, my brother nor I. We can understand it well, but we could never speak it. All we spoke is English growing up. Obviously we had like the strong American accent. So I think for him especially, it was pretty difficult to adjust when we first moved.
Right. I mean, because right now San Jose, I know like there are a lot of people from AP and Telangana, a lot of Telugu community there, and even here in Atlanta. So how was it back then? Like, did you get exposure to do you have good exposure towards Indian culture and Indian food, or the language and all this?
Yeah, I think so in some ways. I mean, my parents have a very tight-knit family friend group, and I think almost all of them are Telugu, and most of them are even from Hyderabad. So, I mean, we would spend almost every weekend with that same family friend group growing up. And so the extent of our exposure to like Indian and Telugu culture especially was through that friend group. But it wasn't, I guess, the true experience because those people have been living in the US for 20, 30 years at that point, including my parents. My parents have been here for 20 years. And so, we weren't like big into like religious ceremonies, we were more just doing it for like, we were more like culturally Hindu and culturally Telugu rather than like very, like devout followers of all the different traditions and things like that.
Got it. So when you move back to India, like after you went back to India, so what was your first reaction? After I know you got a house there. You initially moved into that villa and all that stuff, and I think it was back in 2010. That's where these gated communities and all these were rising in Hyderabad. So how did you feel?
Yeah, again, like I said, for me, I mean, it was pretty exciting. I remember when we first moved, the company had given my dad a guest house, and so we were staying in a guest house in Begumpet for the first few weeks. And it was just, everything was like so new to me. I mean, my only experience of Hyderabad until then was, like I said, summer breaks. And I would just be staying at either your house or Amama's house. So to be in like a guest house in like a high-rise apartment was very like new to me. It was very interesting. And like I hadn't seen Begumpet like that. And yeah, so honestly for me, it was very exciting. And I look back at that time very fondly. And then we moved once our lease at the guest house ended. We moved into a villa, into a gated community, and then I think that's when the reality started to hit me that this isn't just like a vacation anymore. This is like our home. This is where we're gonna live, and the whole concept of a gated community was like completely new to me. I mean, where we grew up in California, there was no such thing. You just have like these open roads, these like little cul-de-sacs, and you could just go wherever you wanted. While in the gated community, it's like, okay, this is your villa, this is the community, and you don't really go outside that. Like you can't just walk or you can't ride your bike or anything. So I think that was new to me.
So how was your experience in school when you joined the school back there, right, in India? So how was your experience? Like, what did you feel like overall in terms of the education system? So how did you get used to it? And did you feel that you belonged there? Or did you feel like an outsider where, you couldn't interact with people and all that? How did you feel about that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, going back to like moving into that gated community, we didn't know anybody. We didn't know any of the kids around us. And so for the first few months, I think we moved in the summer, so school hadn't started yet. Basically, the only person I knew was my brother. And so it was just him and I hanging out. And it was kind of hard to like connect with the other kids and get along with them. We made a few friends, but to be honest, like getting to know them and stuff for both of us, I think was weird. I mean, it was weird to like see how they grew up and, what kind of things they were interested in and like, not to be rude, but like the way they spoke, their English, things like that was just like, it was all very novel to us. So that first adjustment was very hard. I was very lucky, so I first enrolled in an international school. So I went to the International School of Hyderabad. And that was a school where a lot of the UN diplomats, their kids would go there. And so there was people from all over the world, including, a lot of American kids, a lot of European kids. And so when we started school, that's when like things started to go really well, I would say for me. Made a lot of friends, could connect a lot better with the kids there. I think it's just the way I grew up was more closely related to the way they grew up compared to like the kids in the gated community who had lived in India their whole life.
Got it. So in the neighborhood, you had this foreign feeling, but in the school, you were more comfortable.
Yeah, the school was amazing. I mean, they really.
It's in that Extracurriculars campus.
Yeah, Extracurriculars campus. So it was very secluded. We were out like in a farm basically. Like the facilities were very nice. Obviously, like the kids were really cool. It was nice to meet everybody. Just got along with everyone. So
Got it.
for me, it was very easy to adjust because I was a young kid, and when you're a kid, making friends is just so easy, right?
Right.
I'm not too sure how it went for my brother, but I think had we had gone into like a straight CBSE, public or like straight CBSE curriculum,
Right.
um, like Oak Ridge International or like Chirac or something, I think things would have been a lot harder.
Yeah. So, in terms of food, right? Because that is one thing which back then I'm not sure how much Indian food you had. Maybe at home you might have had, but as you grow up, you start to get exposed to more. You have to get used to the food here as well because you might get the lunch from school and all that stuff. So, how did you feel? Do you like Indian food? What is your favorite dish?
Yeah, definitely like Indian food. I grew up eating Indian food. My mom would, I would say 80-90% of the meals she cooked day to day were, Indian. And so it was great to live in Hyderabad and get like real Hyderabadi biryani. That was definitely our favorite. It was always like a treat growing up.
Yeah.
And it was very rare when we lived in the US to like get to eat it. My mom would only make it maybe once or twice a year.
Right.
And then we would only eat it when we went to visit you guys,
Yes.
Alama and like Padama and stuff.
Yeah.
So even that was maybe once every 2 years. And so actually living there and getting to eat like this authentic food whenever we wanted was really great. So for at least for me, the adjustment was very easy. Yeah.
Okay. So my next question is, what is the thing you liked about India when you went back to Hyderabad, right? What is the thing which you liked a lot?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. I think I should acknowledge that I grew up very privileged, both when I was a kid in the U.S. and then I think even especially when I moved to India. I grew up, I would say, pretty wealthy, upper class, and so I had a very different experience, I think, to what many people had. So when I moved to India, the new things and things that were really interesting to me, um, was like I was going to private school. I had a driver. We had this big house and like a gated community. All those things were fairly new to me, and obviously, it's hard not to like those things. I mean, we have so many comforts. I get to be driven around. I'm going to this school in the middle of nowhere and like this beautiful campus. Kind of get to do whatever I want. And so I think in that way, adjusting was pretty easy for me. I got to when you're in India, there's so many more comforts and so many more services that you have access to that you don't have access to in the US unless you're, like a multimillionaire or billionaire.
Right. So if you have to talk about dislikes,
hmm
what did you not like about being in India or Hyderabad?
Yeah, I think for me, the main issue was the language barrier because, like I said, we didn't grow up speaking Telugu. Yeah, I could understand it, but then when we tried to speak it, it was just hopeless. Like, even though I thought I could speak it, my accent was getting in the way. People were having trouble understanding me. And so it was pretty hard for, both my brother and I to do anything outside of either the house or the school, where, yeah, people spoke English, but they were much more comfortable speaking Telugu. And
Right.
so there was always that disconnect whenever we left the house. Like, for example, went to the mall or like wanted to get an auto or order food or something like that. If we weren't with our parents, it was just really hard for us.
Got it.
Mhm.
So, from in terms of the family, right? So you have a lot of family there. You have like us cousins and all that, and we used to meet a lot, and we used to enjoy it. So, one of my question is, it, you moved back to India and you lived there. So here you used to watch movies. You might be exposed to the sports and games. And in India, the popularity is different, right? Like the popular game there is cricket, and also the movies are popular movies are Telugu movies or Indian Hindi Bollywood movies. So did you get to watch any of the movies? Went into the theater and did you get a chance to play cricket?
Yeah, so with the movies, again, because of the language problem, Telugu, yeah, we could understand like conversationally, but the movie Telugu is a little bit different. They're speaking faster and, um, the jokes are different. The jokes wouldn't land for us because we just wouldn't understand, what they're talking about or like the references that they're making. And so I never really got into the movie thing, to be honest. I wish I could understand them better because a lot of my friends growing up were really into Telugu movies and would talk about, like the new Mahesh Babu movie or the new like Pawan Kalyan movie that came out. And so for me, like I never got a chance to relate to those, so I always felt kind of left out. In terms of like cricket and sports, I mean, sports are kind of universal. It's very easy to pick it up. I played cricket every time I would come visit, for like the summer vacations, and so I already had that interest in me, and so when I moved, like, I just picked it up and like, spending time with the mom out there, cricket would always be playing in the house, and so I got to go to a few games as well. So, that was like one of my favorite pastimes.
So at this stage, if you look back, right, do you feel, do you have the regret that you shouldn't have moved back to India because you again came back here for your undergrad, right? What made you choose coming back to, for your undergrad? Why didn't you pursue your undergrad in India? Is it because of the course you picked up, which is not available in India, or what is the reason?
To be honest, when I first moved to India, I always just somehow inherently knew, like, okay, I'm gonna come back to the U.S. And it's like the move to India always, since like day one, was always like kind of temporary for me. I never thought I would stay there for the rest of my life. I figured, okay, whenever, like, we will go back. I don't know when we'll go back, but eventually we will go back. And for me, it turned out to be, going to college. Um, I always saw myself as American, even when I was growing up in India, just because that's always kind of that's the only thing I knew when I first moved. And that's something I kind of held on to even as I was growing up in Hyderabad. And so, coming back for undergrad was like always the only option for me.
Okay. So let's go into the schooling age, right? So in schooling age, the bullying is common anywhere in the world. Okay. Here you have a specific term called bullying. Even in India, we used to see like, we used to bully or they used to bully us and all this used to happen.
Yeah.
So have you experienced bullying in India being, because you were from a different country that people know about from your accent, right?
Yeah.
So did you experience that? And how is bullying here and versus in India?
Yeah. I think if I called what I experienced bullying, that would be kind of hyperbolic. It wasn't, the kids weren't mean to me per se, but I think I was just kind of amusing to them because, like you said, the accent was very different. I couldn't speak Telugu. Um, and like I didn't really understand like a lot of the, like references they talked about or the movies they talked about. And so, yeah, definitely got made fun of a little bit or like kind of like left out. Luckily, like when I first moved to the apartments,
Right.
there were a couple other kids that were like me, grew up in the U.S. but then moved to India when they were young, and so relating that with them was easier. And then eventually, over time, I just kind of got absorbed into like the wider like group of kids. I was always different for sure. I was always like the American kid to them. Um, um, and I think at the beginning it was kind of weird for them to like, talk to me and like hang out with me. But over time, things change and people got used to it.
Right.
Yeah.
So socially, if you have to talk about socially, right? Like in India, they usually say that there is a lot of peer pressure kind of a thing, and in US you're more free. So did you feel that socially? Like what did you feel? Like life in US versus life in Hyderabad.
Can you elaborate?
Like socially we have certain norms, certain restrictions in India that people are looking at you, don't do this, don't do that, and here you are more like a free, you should get dress in a certain way. And even from the relationship standpoint, like you were in your teens, how to interact or mingle with girls, and how these things, how did the how can how do you differentiate between US and
I see what you're asking.
Mm.
I think, I went to an international school and I did like an international syllabus while a lot of my friends were doing, I guess, CBSE or whatever is like the local syllabus. And so I think actually like one main difference that I always noticed was like the ways that we studied. For them, they were basically always studying, always memorizing. And I guess for me, it always felt like more chill. I always had less homework. I had fewer tests, fewer just like less. I didn't need to spend as much time studying. It always felt like, they were always so worried about their exams and the upcoming boards and things like that. For me, it always felt easier. So that was like a main like difference I always picked up when hanging out with my friends. In terms of like other social aspects, it's hard for me to say because I only know what I experienced, which is there, and I didn't get to experience growing up here in my teenage years, so I don't know how different it was. Um, so it's hard for me to speak to that.
Got it. So you were talking about the education system, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how did you feel the education system in India was? I know you went to the international school, but you were also into like Manthan, right, for some time, and friends from CBSE and all. And did you feel the education system was more much better here in US or in India?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I never took CBSE and I never did like the local Indian syllabus. But from what I could see, it seemed more focused on like memorizing and definitely like heavily focused on STEM subjects, so like science and math, like especially math, right? Very heavy on that and less, um, I don't know, less rigorous when it comes to things like language or like social sciences, arts, right? While here, I think there are opportunities for kids to pursue those like seriously. Like if you're into arts or into language, there's so many opportunities for you to take that and go with that as your like main career path. While from what I saw in India, everyone is kind of herded into basically some sort of STEM subject, and for the most part, like engineering, right? It's either engineering or doctor, and mostly people become engineers.
Yeah.
And so that was like one main thing that I noticed for sure.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay, so coming back to the education system and all that. So I see that there are a lot of extracurricular activities here. I think even now in India there are a lot because when I grew up, I used to be active in a lot of the stage drama, sports and all. But it used to be more like that I'm wasting my time. It used to be looked upon like that you're not focusing on your education. So did you feel that in India, like while you were growing up, or while you were studying there, and you went to school here as well? So how did you feel? How do you think that shapes up a person?
Yeah, no, that's definitely something that was very obvious to me when I first moved there. Like you just said, sports and other extracurriculars were kind of seen as fun, and they weren't taken like as seriously, especially in the schools. Um, so yeah, we had access to all those things, but um, it wasn't like something we could pursue if we were really good at it. It didn't feel like, okay, there's a structure for you to go from middle school sports to high school sports to college to then like semi-professional to professional. It never felt like that pathway was there. While here, I think it's very structured. If you're good in high school, then you get recruited by colleges, and then if you're good in college, you get recruited by like professional sports team. And it's like a very clearly defined path that kids can follow. And I think, I mean, you probably know this better than me, so you can speak to this. But like, for example, if a kid is good at cricket in school, it doesn't mean like he's gonna make it to Team India, unless he joins like an academy and specifically like focuses all his time pursuing cricket.
Yeah, yeah, it's very difficult. As you said, it is not structured in India that you don't have that straightforward path. But I think to that, I would say, like, do you feel that you missed that opportunity, moving back to India? Or do you feel that, okay, if you were here, probably your profession would have been different?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when I first moved, I think like right before I moved, I gotten into like my local soccer team. We had the tryouts and everything, and I was so excited to like be joining like this next level and play soccer at this like higher level. And then, we ended up moving and like all of that kind of disappeared. And that kind of like dream of, maybe, I don't know, you never know, right? Playing soccer professionally one day kind of like disappeared as soon as we moved. Because, playing soccer there was just like, okay, I'm playing within the gated community with my friends. And even playing in school was like, okay, yeah, you play until the end of high school and that's it.
Right.
There's no like path forward from there. No, no American college is gonna see any of my talent if I'm playing there. And it was always just taken like less seriously there.
Right.
I hear about kids that were playing high school sports here. It's very serious, very rigorous. They're doing workouts, they're doing training. They're training multiple times a week. while when I was playing sports there, it's just kind of like, yeah, you know, like, okay, if you have enough natural talent to make the team, you're on the team, and that's it. Kind of, you know, we don't like train very seriously. We're not lifting. We're not like focused on nutrition. You know, we're not taking the games like super seriously.
Right.
Yeah.
And here you have those like spaces to play. Like I see lot of people go into every county or every small city or town has a park to play, or to go. You have coaches, you have training centers at every corner, right? So did you miss that part in India? Like,
Yeah, I think so. I mean, like I said, I was very lucky and I went to a great school that, at least for high school, I went to like a very nice school that had kind of all those facilities. But I mean, if you look here, like in the US, for example, every public school will have like a full soccer field, a full football field, a track to run on, like a full gym facility. And, you know, I just don't think it's the same in, you know, all the different schools, at least in Hyderabad at the time.
yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it's not in public schools are very, they are improving, but not up to the mark yet. I definitely agree with you on that point. So, other than this, what did you feel, that lacks in India, which is here?
Sorry. I have to think.
You can be open about it,
Yeah.
like in terms of traffic, probably some things I can remember. So,
Yeah, sure. I mean, things were, I guess, less structured and things were less orderly. You know, it was a little bit chaotic always. I think, like for me, coming from the U.S., things always just seem like kind of chaotic. Like any, I don't know, any interaction or like just driving or just going outside was always like a different level of like danger. I felt like, but I think that made life more fun, to be honest. You know, things can kind of get monotonous here. Everything is just like the same drive every day, the same like experience. While in India, like things are so dynamic, you know, things like every day is just so different. So I kind of really enjoyed that part of it. Life was just more interesting in that way, you know.
so did you get to travel? I know you travel like I think more than 20 countries. So among all this experience, right? What did you feel? If you would you have been a better person, like continuing through living here, or would you have been are you do you think that going back to India and getting exposed to that life also helped you overall?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. You know, in some ways, I'm glad that I got to move back because, you know, main thing I got to spend time with my family, like you guys, you know, my mama out there before they passed. I got to experience like the local culture, you know, what my parents experienced. I got to see, you know, like where my dad grew up, where my mom grew up, you know, how they grew up, and you know, like the different traditions, the different festivals, why we take certain things so seriously, like you know, all the different like cultural differences, like how to, you know, how to dress, how to act in public, you know, how you talk to people, like different forms of respect, you know. So definitely, like, I'm so glad that I got exposed to that. But then, you know, in some ways, I kind of wish that I either stayed there or stayed here my whole life because there are definitely points in my life where I felt very confused. Um, and I think like the hardest part for me, you know, hard is like relative, but like for me in my life, the hardest part, you know, I always felt like two Americans for the Indian kids, and then sometimes like two Indian for the American kids, and so it's like kind of, it's like I don't know where I fall, you know. Right, understood. So, if you have to talk about, certain things like your exposure towards the world. So in India, you have a lot of exposure. As you said, you have people from different levels of financial backgrounds. You will see, you might have also seen some level of poverty, around you, and you'll see that class difference a lot. In US, you don't get to see that a lot, right? So do you think that's a good exposure for kids to have, or do you think it's not required? Yeah, this is something I thought about and think about a lot. I mean, like 1000% yes, it's good to see how the rest of the world lives because, you know, growing up in the US, you're very, at least for me, you know, growing up where I did, things are very sheltered. Everyone is kind of the same socioeconomic status, like within your immediate community, and everyone kind of lives the same life. While like you said in India, it's just like you get to see like everything, like from the poorest of the poor to like the richest of the rich. And growing up in the U.S., I always thought like, okay, this is how the rest of the world is. The rest of the world, to me, I always thought looked like San Jose.
Right.
But then when I went to India, I was like, okay, no, like actually the rest of the world is like this.
Right.
Things are different. Things are not the same as they are in the U.S. And I think that perspective, like seeing how other people live, is very important for for people to realize. And it helped me realize like how privileged I was, and how lucky I was to have like access to all the opportunities that I did, and get to experience like all the things that I got to experience.
So you and your brother got into Ivy Leagues, right? Suman went to Harvard law school, and you went into probably UCSD,
Yeah.
right? Both are really good schools.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember, at a point while he was applying to Yale or some of these institutions, I think one of the things he told me was your SOP will have a strong value because you have good academics in your background, but there are some things which he felt that was not in India, that they're not, you don't have this volunteering programs where you get some points, and your sports and activities also adds up to your grades, which will help you in getting into these Ivy Leagues or strengthening your SOP. So do you think you missed that part being in India, or how did it impact your opportunity of getting into the schools here?
Yeah, I think it's very different. Just to clarify for the record, I did not go to an Ivy League. My
Yeah,
dad was the
you're
only one that did. But actually, I have a question for you. So I guess getting into like the top schools in India, IIT and stuff, is it purely just based on your grades and like how well you do on the exams?
Yeah, it is mostly academics.
Okay.
Your academic
You'd say
background.
like 90%.
Yeah, I would say 90%.
Okay.
I would say like 95%.
Yeah. So I think the top schools in America, academics is definitely important, but even if you're like the top of your class, the top of your state, does not mean that you'll get into the best schools like the Harvards or the MITs and stuff. Here they really value, like you said, like extracurriculars, volunteering, research or like working while you're a student, and like creativity. Your life story too is like very important. Um, from what I know, I think the application process and the review is a lot more holistic here, meaning like they want to know everything about you as a person. Just because you have the best grades doesn't necessarily mean you'll be the best fit for that school. And even if you don't have the best grades, if you have like mitigating circumstances, for example, you grew up like a difficult area, or like you didn't go to the best school, like you didn't have access to the best schools or the best education or like the best extracurriculars, like those things can sometimes I don't want to say help you, but those things are understood and taken into account when they're reviewing your application. So yeah, you may not have the best grades, but did you make the most of your situation? And I think that's like the beauty of the US. Everyone gets an equal opportunity here.
Got it. Okay. So to conclude, I have a question for you. Do you like living like an Indian origin guy in US, or do you like living like an American citizen in India?
I think I always considered myself American growing up, and so I feel a lot more comfortable here. This feels more like home to me. And so yeah, I think the answer to your question is being Indian origin, but living here. I'm very glad that I got to live in Hyderabad and like experience, like my ancestors' culture basically, and like see, that side of the world. And I feel like I wouldn't be the same person that I am today if I hadn't gotten to do that. And so I'm so glad that I got that exposure. But at the same time, I'm happy here, I'm settled here, and I see myself living here, for the rest of my life.
Okay. So from relationships, right, dating and all, do you prefer to marry a girl who's from India, who was born and grew up in India, or do you prefer to someone who's like you, who lived here, or do you prefer to go with an American? I know it is not a straightforward question. It varies based on individual, but I'm asking from your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I have like a strict, like, strict boundaries on like, the type of person that I want. I mean, at the end of the day, it's like if you get along with them or not, right? I think it would be easier for me to relate to like, either like someone like me who is Indian but grew up here, or like any other race that just grew up, like any other American, just because, like I'm sure like our culture is like pretty similar, our like way of doing things is similar, the way we speak and things like that. So I think, yeah, I think it was just
Yes. So where do you think you have more freedom, to express in India? Because even in India you have freedom of speech. Here you have freedom of speech. Where did you notice, that there is real freedom in terms of living?
Yeah, I think here for sure. Going back to like the dating thing, like going out with a girl here, like when you're a kid, like when you're in your teenage years, is not that strange. But I remember going out with a girl, in Hyderabad at the time. We'd get a lot of looks, it would just be like me and a girl. And definitely like all the aunties and uncles would kind of look at us. No one would ever say anything, but you definitely felt like that weird
Those
pressure.
glances will seem a little weird to you.
Yeah, exactly. So I think like, yeah, you're more free in that way to kind of express yourself. Um, but also in India, you can, in some ways, you can also kind of do whatever you want, right? Like
Right.
nobody really stops you from doing anything.
Yeah.
If you want to go out, you can go out. You can Uber anywhere. Like money is not as big of an issue there.
You can get services at a reasonable cost.
Services are much cheaper and much more accessible.
Right.
So like going out as a kid was just so much easier than from what I imagined it would be like growing up here.
Got it. So if you have to advise, right? For example, if you have to advise Ivancha, we'll probably take your advice very seriously, or any of my friends or any of the viewers. What do you advise? Should we take back our kids at a certain age? And if yes, what will be the right age? Or if not, do you advise that they should live here, and continue their life here? Because I think most of the kids, even if they go back as they are American citizens, they'll come back after a certain age. So what do you advise?
Yeah, I think it's important to make that decision as parents pretty early on in the kid's life. Because what happened, for example, with people that I know is the older your kid gets, the harder it is for you to make a drastic move like that. I haven't been to Hyderabad in the last, I don't know, 6, 7 years, so I don't know what it's like now. But at the time, it was like such a drastic change. Like things are just so different, moving from like California to Hyderabad, right? And if you do that to a kid in their like teenagers, for example, I think it can be very traumatic, and like the adjustment probably won't be very smooth. But for me, I was very young, so like the whole thing was just exciting to me. So I think if you make that decision as parents when the kid is young, things can go well. If you ultimately plan for them to come back here, I think like the type of school and like the environment that they grow up in is like really important. I probably wouldn't, if I had a kid and I was a parent, I would probably try to send them to a similar school that I went to, where you have like exposure to like, I don't know, Western culture, and Western tradition, and like the Western way of schooling and like doing things.
Right.
Just because when they eventually come back for, undergrad or master's or whatever, like that adjustment isn't as difficult to me.
Right. I know there are certain parts in US where, even if they go back to India, they won't feel like, they came to a foreign place, because even here certain parts became, there is a lot of Telugu community which is here. It is now a little different. But I think to sum up what Gautam said, overall, Gautam ఏమంటున్నాడంటే తనకి కిడ్ ఇక్కడే పుట్టి ఒకవేళ ఫ్యూచర్లో ఇక్కడే సెటిల్ అవ్వాలి అంటే ఇక్కడ ఉండడమే బెటర్. ఒకవేళ ఇండియాకి వెళ్ళినా కూడా ఇక్కడ కల్చర్ నుంచి డిఫరెన్షియేట్ అవ్వకుండా అట్లాంటి స్కూల్స్లో చదవడం, అట్లాంటి ఎన్వైరన్మెంట్లోనే పెరగడం బెటర్ అని గౌతమ్ ఒపీనియన్. అండ్ అట్ ద సేమ్ టైం గౌతమ్కి ఒకవేళ ఆప్షన్ ఉంటే ఇక్కడే కంటిన్యూ చేస్తా అన్నాడు. అండ్ ఇక్కడ ఓవరాల్గా ఐ థింక్ 8 or 9 years ఆ ఏజ్ కంటే ముందే వెళ్ళిపోతే బెటర్ ఫర్ ద కిడ్స్.
Yeah.
సో అదనమాట. ఇండియాకి వెళ్ళడం, గ్రాండ్ పేరెంట్స్తో టైం స్పెండ్ చేయడం, ఇప్పుడు గ్రాండ్ పేరెంట్స్ కూడా ఇక్కడికి వస్తున్నారు, ఇక్కడ కూడా టైం స్పెండ్ చేస్తున్నారు కిడ్స్. బట్ ఓవరాల్గా వెళ్ళడం అనేది మంచిదే ఒక రకంగా నన్ను అడిగితే. బట్ లైక్ మీరు ఆలోచించాలి, లైక్ కిడ్స్ ఫ్యూచర్ ఏంటి, దాని తర్వాత ఏంటి, వాళ్ళ లైఫ్ ఏంటి అని. దాన్ని బట్టి వీ ఆల్ కెన్ మేక్ ఎ డెసిషన్. Thank you, Raghavam. Thank you very much. And I think this you spoke really well, and this will definitely help a lot of people like us who are in that dilemma.
Yeah, no, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah.